A letter of resignation actually was something I started to craft when my first son Nicholas was about to be born. I kept thinking about what kind of world is he going to inherit when he's born, and I felt like there were some things I needed to correct for myself, within myself, but also to put out there. And so it became my declaration of independence in a way. And I go back to what I consider to be the most prolific, um, interesting for sure, but the most prolific and probably the most gangster resignation letter in history, right? Which is the one that we penned to, to the King of England and saying, we quit, basically, right? And it says, the preamble of our Constitution really addresses, the power that we have as individuals to correct things when things are not going right. And so saying to a form of government, we're not going to take this anymore, and do it in an eloquent sort of way, I thought was really fascinating. And the more I read, the more I understood we can craft our own liberation. And the first step is to quit history. And I've had a few history teachers say, what? Please don't tell our students to do it. I said, well, it's not quitting the entire history. It's United States was founded as a republic. It is democratic, but it is a republic, which means we elect people, to be our voices, right? And so it's by representation. And somehow in history, some folks have been elected to represent certain events, certain stories, and depending on who's doing the choosing and who they chose, we have a different form of history that is told. And so in that history, African Americans never really founded anything beyond peanut butter, right? And it's kind of like, wait a minute, have we contributed to a lot more to this country? For sure. So whose narrative are we really pushing forward? And then there's also representation of who is elected as African Americans or as Black folks in general to represent certain events. And sometimes, again, who's doing the choosing, right? They choose.
Right.
One of the key things I love about the premise of your show is that you say when there's an event happening, the news cameras tend to find not the articulate people, not the folks that they know could actually provide some insight to the story, but they're looking for sound bites, right? And sometimes they pull the random individuals who aren't ready for the camera, who aren't ready to talk about this, right? And I joke that they never invite poets to CNN, right? I said, we have all these political pundits. I said, I just wish they would bring a poet to the show so that way we can have conversations about what's really going on in this country. So a letter of resignation became a way that I addressed a bunch of these different things because, we weren't being invited to the table. And so I quit a lot of things in there. I quit a lot of narratives. And so it is quitting a version of history that keeps the people oppressed. It is quitting a version of history that keeps us wanting what other people want versus finding out what we truly want, right? Because we've been told that, well, you have to compromise, or you have to wait, or you have to, basically, that's just how it is. You have to adjust to it. And we are actually empowered by the Constitution to overthrow anything that we find very oppressive, right? And it was key when a certain person was elected that I self-published the book, because I had sent it out as a manuscript, and in a few different places they really liked it, but it was always, as they say, a bridesmaid, but never the bride, right? Never selected. But the timing of that election, someone who's going to take office who's known notoriously to make up lies, right? To make up things. And he believes them, and then he passes them on as facts.
He's the Lion King.
Oh, yes. Lion King. And I grew up with him in New York City, putting ads in newspaper about people, doing all sorts of things, right? And so I said, I cannot have my son live in this world without having me say no. I quit all these negative things about our representation, how we're being represented. And it goes through a lot. It's a libretto because it's heavily based on music. I'm a very musical person, so there's jazz in there, there's rap, There's rock too. There's blues for sure. There's gospel. There's all sorts of things weaved into the narrative, because I believe our history has been hijacked. And for us to claim it back, we have to quit one version of history and start telling our version.
I'm just saying to you that when we're looking at this, right, this telescope, or because what does the telescope do, right? It brings things that are far away into focus, right? Okay. But we're living right next to you. We're living right next to your community and stuff, and we've been living here all this time, and yet we still are out of focus.
Yes.
Because your vision is blurred, right?
Yeah. And see, this is why you need to start writing your poetry again, because a lot of what you're talking about is great substance for poetry. In fact, I know we're talking about my book coming out in July, but right now I'm working on my second manuscript of poems, and a lot of it deals with space and our obsession in finding other planets. And there's a poem in it that I actually just sent out, and I'm hoping, it gets picked up. I kind of sent it to prestigious in magazines, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to send it out there because I need to ask this question. And the first line of the poem is there a place where Black men can go to be beautiful? And it sort of really deals with our obsession with traveling to other planets, to discovering life on other planets, when we have people in our own communities here on Earth that we're not focusing on. We love to look at the night sky and look for comets, and we look for radiance in the sky, but we have some beautifully radiant people right next to us and we don't acknowledge them, right? And so instead we take them down, we shoot them down, we keep them oppressed. And there's a lot of beauty in this world that we don't celebrate. And so the collection, which right now is close to 200 pages of poetry, I'm hoping to pare it down, but it's really trying to cast a pretty giant net on how we actually treat each other, and how we are obsessed with alien life, outside of, the planet, where the Earth is so big. This planet is so big, and yet we don't know each other. We don't necessarily know neighbor. We think we know, we don't get to know. And so I'm hoping that with this collection that it actually casts a bigger lens. And I do a lot of zooming in and zooming out to provide some relative concepts about human interaction. And at the end of the day, it's not the planet that we have to save. It's humanity. So it's humanity that's at risk right now. The Earth will stand like the other planets have, on its own. The question is, how will we function as a group of people? Will we get better? I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of hope. I see a lot of hope in other people, but I still think we have a long ways to go in terms of acknowledging each other as human beings.